The Earl Grey Girls, Week 1, The Gate. Galway Workhouse, October 1847. The rain had begun before dawn and had not stopped all day. It fell in a fine mist that seemed to seep into everything: the road, the clothing, the skin, even the spirit. The four figures trudging slowly toward the high stone walls of the Galway workhouse scarcely noticed it any more. They had long since stopped trying to stay dry. Tig O'Neill leaned heavily upon a rough ash walking stick he had cut months before. Each step brought another fit of coughing, forcing him to stop until the spasm passed. The famine had taken much from him. It had taken his land, his strength, and now it seemed his lungs. Mary walked beside him, though walked was hardly the word. She drifted more than she stepped, her movements slow and uncertain, as though she'd become detached from her own body. Her cheeks had sunk deeply into her face, and a shawl wrapped tightly round her shoulders hung from her like a blanket draped over a fence post. Behind them came their daughters. Patricia, 15, could scarcely lift her feet from the muddy road. Fever had burned in her for nearly a week. Sometimes she knew where she was, sometimes she didn't. Her younger sister Maureen, only 13 years old, supported Patricia as best she could, wrapping an arm around her waist whenever she stumbled. Though she was younger, hunger had made them seem almost the same age. The family hadn't spoken for nearly an hour. There seemed little left to say. The workhouse appeared gradually through the rain. It was larger than Maureen had imagined. Much larger. High limestone walls surrounded the buildings, broken only by narrow windows and a heavy wooden gate banded with black iron. People waited outside, dozens of them, perhaps more. Entire families stood silently in the rain. Old men sat against the wall, too weak to remain standing. A mother tried to hush an infant that no longer had the strength to cry. Children with hollow eyes stared at nothing. No one complained. Complaining required energy. "Is this it?" Patricia's voice was scarcely above a whisper. Mary nodded. "It is." Patricia looked at the walls. "They're keeping people in." "No," Tig answered gently. "They're trying to keep people alive." He hoped he believed it. The queue moved slowly. Every few minutes another family disappeared through the great gate. Nobody came out. Maureen noticed the silence. There were no raised voices, no arguments, no laughter. Only the shuffle of tired feet and the occasional cough echoing through the drizzle. She took her mother's hand. "Ma'am?" Mary squeezed it weakly. "Will we stay together?" Mary looked towards Tig. Neither answered immediately. Finally Tig spoke. "I don't know." He hated saying those words. For months he had said them more often than any father should. When at last their turn came, a porter stepped forward carrying a ledger. Name? Tig O'Neill. Occupation? Tenant farmer. The man dipped his pen. Wife? Mary. Daughters? Patricia. He paused. Maureen. The porter continued writing, then looked up. Any money? No. Food? No. Property? Tig almost laughed. No. The porter nodded without expression. There was nothing unusual about those answers any more. Another official approached. You understand the regulations? Tig shook his head. The man spoke as though reciting something he had repeated hundreds of times. Men and boys over 2 years of age are housed separately from women and girls. Mary looked suddenly alarmed. What? You will not remain together. Patricia grasped her mother's sleeve. No. Maureen looked from one parent to the other. What does he mean? Mary's voice trembled. We stay together. The official shook his head. Not inside. But my husband... Women's quarters, he pointed. Men's quarters. Another gesture towards a different building. The children remain with the female side. No. Mary stepped forward. My husband is ill. So are half the men already admitted. He needs me. He'll receive the same care as everyone else. She stared at him. Then who will look after him? The official didn't answer, because everyone already knew the answer. No one. Tig reached for Mary's hand. It's all right. She turned towards him. It isn't. He smiled softly. No, it isn't. For a long moment they simply stood together. The porter cleared his throat. There are others waiting. Tig placed a trembling hand upon Patricia's head, then upon Maureen's. You mind your mother. Both girls nodded. He looked at Maureen a little longer. She had always been the quieter of the two, the observer, the one who watched before speaking. Look after your sister. I will. He believed her. Mary suddenly threw her arms around her husband. The embrace lasted only seconds before one of the attendants stepped forward. That's enough. Tig kissed her forehead. I'll see you soon. Neither believed it. Maureen watched as her father was led toward another doorway. He stopped once, turned, raised one hand, then disappeared inside the men's ward. She never imagined that the sound of a closing door could hurt so much. The women were led through a long stone corridor. Everything smelled of damp clothing, soap, sickness, and something else Maureen couldn't identify. Later she would recognize it. Disinfectant could not entirely hide the smell of disease or death. The matron met them inside. She was a stern-looking woman, with grey hair tightly pinned beneath a white cap. Her voice carried authority, but not unkindness. You'll be washed. Your clothes will be inspected. If they're infested, they'll be burned. Mary instinctively wrapped her shawl tighter. It's all we have. The matron looked at it. If it can be saved, it will be. If. That one small word seemed to frighten Mary more than anything else she had heard that day. The women entered the washing room. Buckets of steaming water lined one wall. Several women stood waiting. One attendant pointed toward Patricia. She's fevered. Another nodded. Infirmary. Mary immediately stepped forward. I'll go with her. No. I'm her mother. The fever ward is separate. Patricia reached desperately towards her. Ma'am. Mary held her daughter's hand until the very last moment. Then another woman gently prized her fingers apart. Patricia was led away, still looking back, still reaching, until she disappeared through another doorway. For the first time in 13 years, Maureen found herself standing beside her mother, without her father, without her sister. The workhouse had taken less than an hour to divide the family that famine had failed to destroy. That night, the women's dormitory held nearly 100 people. Some slept. Some cried quietly into their blankets. Some stared at the ceiling. Mary lay awake beside Maureen. Neither spoke. At some point during the night, Maureen felt her mother's hand searching for hers in the darkness. She held it tightly. She did not let go until morning. Neither of them knew that, before another week had passed, their family of 4 would become a family of 2, and before the month was over, only one O'Neill would remain. Week 2. The Bell. Galway Workhouse, October 1847. The bell rang before daylight. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Within the workhouse, the bell governed every part of life. It announced when to rise, when to wash, when to pray, when to eat, when to work, and when to sleep. Before long, Maureen came to think of it not as a sound, but as another warden, one that never tired and never forgot. She sat upright on the narrow wooden bed she shared with another girl. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she saw the long rows of beds stretching across the dormitory. The coughing, the whispering, the smell. She remembered. Breakfast consisted of a thin oat stirabout ladled into cracked wooden bowls. It was hot. That alone made it precious. The girls sat shoulder to shoulder at long tables. Nobody spoke. There was only the scrape of spoons against wood. Maureen ate slowly. She wanted to save some for later. A girl opposite her noticed. You'll lose it. What? They'll take it away. Maureen looked confused. You eat it now, or someone else will. Maureen finished the bowl in 3 hurried mouthfuls. The other girl nodded. You'll learn. After breakfast, Maureen searched every face she passed. She hoped to catch sight of Patricia, or perhaps her father crossing one of the exercise yards. Instead, she found only strangers. The workhouse had been designed to separate, not simply men from women, families from one another, comfort from grief, hope from memory. Later that morning, a nurse from the infirmary entered the women's ward. Mary O'Neill? Mary stood immediately. Yes? The nurse looked at her with practised sympathy. Come with me. Maureen instinctively followed. No. The nurse held up a hand. Only the mother. I want to come. You cannot. Mary looked at Maureen. I'll be back soon. She smiled. It was a smile that carried far more courage than certainty. The infirmary occupied a separate wing of the workhouse. Its wards were quieter than the dormitories, not because people rested, because many were too weak to speak. Rows of beds filled every room. Some held children no older than 5, others held old men whose faces seemed carved from parchment. Many coughed, some moaned softly, some simply stared upward. Mary's eyes searched desperately. Patricia? A nurse pointed toward the far corner. There. Patricia looked smaller than she had only yesterday. Her fever had reddened her cheeks unnaturally. Her breathing came quickly. Ma'am. Mary rushed to her side. I'm here. Patricia reached for her hand. I thought... What? I thought you weren't coming. Mary stroked the damp hair from her father's forehead. I'll always come. The nurse waited respectfully before speaking. There's someone else. Mary frowned. Who? The men's infirmary. Her heart stopped. Tig? The nurse nodded slowly. He's taken a bad turn. Mary's eyes widened. I need to see him. I'm sorry. They're separate wards. I don't care. The rules. My husband is dying. The nurse's expression softened. I know. Please. I cannot. Mary stood motionless. The walls seemed to close around her. Only a few 100 feet separated her from her husband. Yet she might as well have been on the other side of the world. That afternoon, Maureen waited anxiously for her mother's return. When Mary finally entered the dormitory, she looked years older than she had that morning. How's Patricia? She's still fevered. And Da? Mary sat heavily upon the bed. They wouldn't let me see him. Maureen felt a knot form in her stomach. Is he very sick? Mary nodded. Neither spoke again. The bell rang twice during the night, the first time another woman in the dormitory died. Her body was carried quietly away before dawn. The second bell came just after sunrise. A porter entered. Mary O'Neill? She stood immediately. The porter removed his cap. Maureen knew. Before a single word was spoken, she knew. I'm sorry, the porter hesitated. Your husband passed away during the night. Mary didn't cry, not immediately. She simply stared. No. I'm sorry. No. He was asking for you. The words shattered whatever strength remained, and Mary sank slowly onto the edge of the bed. Her hands covered her face. A sound escaped her that Maureen had never heard before. It wasn't weeping. It was grief stripped of language. There was no funeral for the family to attend, no wake, no final blessing spoken together. The dead of the workhouse could not wait. There were too many every week. Tig O'Neill was buried with others from the institution in a common grave outside Galway. His wife and daughters were never permitted to stand beside him. Something inside Mary seemed to leave with her husband. She still walked, still answered questions, still visited Patricia whenever she was allowed, but the light behind her eyes had gone. She ate little, she slept less. The matron noticed. So must the rest of us. But Mary only nodded. 2 days later, Maureen accompanied her mother to the infirmary. The nurse allowed it this time. Patricia smiled weakly when she saw them. Ma'am. My darling, you've been crying. Mary forced another smile, a little. Patricia looked from one to the other. Where's Da? The room fell silent. Mary knelt beside the bed. Your father, she struggled to continue, has gone to God. Patricia stared. When? 2 nights ago. The girl turned her face towards the wall and she said nothing, not a single word. A single tear slipped quietly across her cheek. The following morning the bell rang again. Mary never heard it. Maureen woke first. Her mother's hand still rested upon hers, but it was strangely cold. Ma'am? No answer. She squeezed gently. Ma'am? The woman sleeping in the next bed looked over, then quickly called for the nurse. The nurse arrived within moments, and she placed 2 fingers against Mary's neck, then quietly closed the older woman's eyes. What? Maureen's voice trembled. What happened? The nurse answered softly. Sometimes... She paused. The heart simply gives up. Maureen looked at her mother. She seemed peaceful. almost as though she had finally fallen asleep after many sleepless nights. The nurse placed an arm gently around the 13-year-old. "You've family still." Maureen nodded automatically. "Patricia." "Yes." The nurse hesitated. "We'll do everything we can." That afternoon, Maureen sat alone in the exercise yard. She watched the autumn wind carry yellow leaves across the stones. 24 hours earlier, she had still had a mother. 3 days before that, a father. Now she only had Patricia. Inside the infirmary, her sister lay burning with fever. Beyond the walls of the workhouse, Ireland continued to starve. The bell rang once more. Somewhere else in the building, another family was being told that someone they loved would never answer again. For the first time since arriving at the workhouse, Maureen understood that hunger was not the only thing people feared within its walls. Sometimes people came here to survive and stayed only long enough to die.